Good afternoon and Tashi Dilek to all Dhamma friends. I'm going to take a quotation of Lord Buddha here. Buddha once said that the mind is everything. What you think, you become. So with this, I, on the behalf of Arunachal Buddhist Council tradition of Nalanda tradition, would like to welcome each and everyone. I personally would like to thank each and everyone for joining and tuning with us for this one-day virtual conference on the topic, how to be a Buddhist on 21st century, primary factors, primary consciousness and its mental factors. This webinar is organized by Arunachal Buddhist Council of Nalanda tradition. I would like to extend my heartiest welcome to His Eminence, the Abbot of Sera Mey Monastery. I'm grateful to Geshe Lharampa for accepting our invitation. And Geshe Lharampa, we are very thankful to you that you have given your precious time to us, and we are very eager to listen to your teachings. Now with this, I'm requesting the students of Monpa community to welcome our today's speaker, His Eminence, Geshe Tashi Tsering with Khada. Geshe Lharampa, please accept our love and respect from Arunachal Pradesh. Can you present the? Can you offer the Khada to our today's speaker?
Oh yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Sincere greeting. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Geshe Lharampa, for accepting our love and respect from Arunachal Pradesh. Now proceeding forward, according to agenda. Before going to the main session, now I want to give you a brief introduction about Geshe Lharampa. His Eminence is the present abbot of Sera Mey Monastery, and he was appointed by His Holiness the Dalai Lama in the year 2018. He received his early education in school run by the exile Tibetan Administration in India. He joined Sera Monastery for his further studies and finished his Geshe Lharampa degree in the year 1990. He was teaching Buddhism in the West from 1991 to 2018, mainly in United Kingdom and in other countries. He had written and he had created a 2-year online Buddhist course on the Foundation of Buddhist Thought. He has completed his master's in Social Anthropology from London University, and it's a proud moment for every Buddhist that in the year 2019, Geshe Tashi Tsering was awarded the British Empire Medal for his services to Buddhism in the United Kingdom. Geshe Lharampa, we are very honored and privileged today that you have joined with us. So with this, now I'm requesting our today's speaker, the Abbot of the Sera Mey Monastery, Geshe Tashi Tsering, to start his lecture. Now Geshe Lharampa, over to you. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much giving this opportunity to share my understanding and experiences in Buddha Dharma, Buddhist teachings, in this 21st century lifestyle, in this 21st century, the environment. And I'm very honored and also very humbled to have this opportunity. And I will try all my best to share my understanding and experiences in Buddha Dharma, on the topic of how to be a Buddhist in the 21st century. That's the main topic. And I will also touch on one of the main important topics or subjects, which in the Buddhist teachings and also subsequently great Indian masters have elaborated. That is, the understanding of mind, emotion, consciousness, thought process, and so forth. And here it is titled saying primary consciousness and the mental factors. That is more traditional title, but mainly briefly touch on that subject from the Buddhist point of view. So on these two topics, most of my time I will spend on the first topic, that is how to be a Buddhist in the 21st century. And I'm very much, moved, and also, the joy to hear the Arunachal Buddhist Council of the Nalanda tradition have this, the organization to provide the younger generations to have the opportunity to not just to have the modern 21st century, the education, but also to have the opportunity to learn and to put into practice in their everyday life. One of the most ancient Indian spiritual tradition, that is Buddhism. And, that is really something worthwhile to organize, worthwhile to have this kind of times and, the resources to the younger generations, And so when I was asked to have this, to give a talk to the group, I was very pleased to know there is this group and have a eager to learn, the Buddha Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, and followed by the great Nalanda masters, at this 21st century, which is very important to have that kind of opportunity. So I would like to say thank you for the organizers and also to the members. You have that interest and give time to have this, this gathering. So we have about altogether about 2 hours. We'll see how much time that we'll spend on my talk, and also at the end we'll have Q&A, question and answer. And from my experience, quite often question and answer time is more productive, more interest than the speakers talk. And as you know, our ability to retain our attention and to pay attention is not that very long, maximum 45 minutes. In majority, after 15 to 20 minutes, our what you call the attention will slowly, go down. And under that situation, sometimes it is not that productive. But we all try. I will try all my best to hold my attention to share with you on the topic. And also, I'm sure you will do all your best. Now, then, our topic is not just not just in a topic worldly subject. It is a topic which has which is also connected, related with spirituality, or within the spirituality, particularly the teachings of the Buddha and great Nalanda masters, the teachings. Therefore, it is very useful and helpful, all of us, including myself, at the beginning of our gathering, to hold a positive thought, positive mind, traditionally called positive motivation or intention. A mind, any kind of positive thought can be useful. For example, thinking this afternoon, physically, verbally, mentally, I'm at this gathering and I'm going to listen. I'm going to pay my attention. And if there are questions, I'm going to ask questions. So my participation with this conference is not just to raise my intellectual understanding. It is not just be here as a what you call the participant. It is something to benefit to myself right here and now, and also to benefit to my fellow human beings, including my friends, my what you call the parents, relatives, colleagues, and to the wider community, in the society. For that purpose, for that reason, I'm here to join this gathering. And that kind of intention or that kind of mind, what traditionally called positive intention or positive motivation, will be very, very useful to make our activity fruitful, helpful, useful to ourselves and to others. So therefore, I would suggest to all the participants, including myself, really to set a positive mind, positive intention to join this gathering, So that will be very, very helpful. Okay, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to start my talk. First to lay down the foundation for the today's topic. How to be a Buddhist in this 21st century. Now the foundation is this. All of us, regardless of having different background, different skin color, where we were born in different continents, brought up under different cultures, regardless of all these differences, we all share some common, what you call the very much basic common qualities, or common sort of, yearning, common desire. And that is something very, very important to be acknowledged important to be aware of, to talk about to becoming or how to be a Buddhist on the 21st century. So our common desire, our common yearning is that we all, have deep down, there's a yearning to be a happy person, to be a person, who have less challenges, less difficulties, less, problems. And that is a very common feature, very fundamental nature that we all share. We all share. There's no argument whether we have that kind of desire or not. I think regardless of different philosophical background, the different religious background, we all share that. And when I was in London, I usually tease to my friends who come to my classes. I say, if you go to do a survey, to go and do a survey in front of a public place and ask, do you have that desire to be a happy person? I would guarantee 99% people will answer to say, yes, I have that desire to be a happy person, to be a joyful person. And that is something we should acknowledge. We should be aware of that. And also, that what I've shared with you, although it is in the Buddhist teachings and also subsequent Nalanda masters, they all talk on that, using slightly different terminologies, but they all talk about that. We all have that yearning, longing to be a happy person and free from any form of pain and difficulties. So that is something important. Under that foundation, that's the fundamental foundation that we all should be aware of. Then the next thing is when we talk about, I yearn, I have a desire to be a happy person, to be free from difficulties. Then we come to the next question: what kind of fulfillment? What kind of happiness? What kind of joyful that we are talking about, that we are longing for, that we are desired to? Then, next question again, that is very much, fundamental nature that we all have. That is, when we talk about I'm longing happiness, I have a strong desire to have a joy and fulfillment. I have a strong impulse not to have any form of difficulties, pain and sufferings, which is very fundamental nature. Then then next step is what kind of happiness that you would like to experience. What kind of pain and difficulty that you would like to be separated, that you would like to be eliminated. Then that we are talking about physical and mental, happiness, joy, fulfillment, and also pain and difficulties. So our existence here is not just this physical body. And that is, we all know from our own experiences. Our existence is combination of body and mind, or body and consciousness. And that is whether consciousness is part of our brain or the consciousness is separate from our brain or not. That is the different discussion that we may touch on later. But from the past 1,000 years tradition like Buddhism or Jainism, other ancient Indian spiritual traditions, or modern, those what you call the modern, the field like neuroscience and so on and so forth. Our existence is not just this physical body, but there is a consciousness, emotions are also involved. And that is something important for us to acknowledge. My existence is not just this physical body. My existence has another dimension, that is my mental world. My emotions, my thoughts, my consciousnesses, my memories, my wishes, my yearnings, they are also part of my existence. And that understanding, that acknowledgement is very, very helpful and useful to have this discussion that we are having. So we don't need to talk about that much our physical well-being. I think we all know, now in this 21st century, there are so many means and methods how to keep this physical body very well and healthy. In a certain extent, it's gone beyond what we need. There are so many means and methods, as you know. For example, when I was in London, sometimes I go do some shoppings in some of those big malls and those stores, and if you go there, no matter how many levels are there, what you call the ground level, all these big stores, all these big shopping centers, ground level is full of mainly women to make up their face and to have all those the very expensive scents and so on and so forth. So many things are there. If you go to a pharmacy, there are so many, not just medicine, there are so many what you call the vitamins, food supplements, and so on and so forth. If you go to somewhere in the corner, you will see there will be a good yoga studios you can join. So this 21st century, there are lots of industries, lots of institutions, lots of businesses, how to keep our physical body well, healthy, and less difficulties. And that is good news. I'm not saying that's wrong. I think that's good news. However, there aren't many institutions, there aren't many means and methods, there aren't many what you call the ways or institutions to help us how to keep our mental state well and healthy. And that is not there very much. That's not there very much. Although these days, particularly in the developed country like United States or in Europe and also some of those 5 countries, they do some meditations like mindfulness meditations and so on and so forth. But still, they are mainly focused on physical well-being, not very much mental well-being to keep the mental state healthy. And that is, now, as I just said a few minutes ago, our existence is not just this physical existence. Our existence has mental dimension. So keeping our mental states, our consciousnesses, our emotions, our thoughts, our memories, our keeping them healthy and sound is also part of our own responsibility, So therefore, the acknowledging that me to be a happy person, which I want, which I would like to. I have a strong desire to be a happy person, joyful person. Then, to do that, it is not just to keep the physical body or the external materials, plenty. It is not enough. We need to look at also our half part of what we are, that is our mental state or our minds, emotions, and thoughts. And in that, our today's topic also have a very strong connection, the 21st century Buddhist. How to be a 21st century Buddhist have a strong connection to this, how to keep our mental state well, healthy, and the less disturbances. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama says very often, we need hygiene of emotion. Hygiene of emotion. The hygiene of physical well-being is plenty there, means, methods, information, institutions, and so forth, but very few, means and methods and possibilities how to keep our emotion very, to keep hygiene of our emotion. That's not that much, and that is really something you younger generation need to pay attention. So that is very much my foundation to talk about our today's first main topic. So I'm going to do a brief summary so far what I've said. I'm going to summarize the two. The first thing is what I said. We all have, regardless of differences, different culture, different background, different education, different skin colors, and different continents, wherever we're all, regardless of all these differences, we all human beings share some fundamental, the yearnings and desires. That is yearning to be a happy person, a joyful person, and desire not to have any form of difficulties and problems. And that is something important. And we all have the right, to fulfill that yearning, that desire. Nobody has more right to other people, because many of my, examples I'm going to share with you related to my recent life where I lived in UK. So in UK, as United Kingdom, as you know, there is a what you call the culture. There's a queen. I usually tease to the English people in this regard, to fulfill that fundamental desire to have happiness, joyful. Queen doesn't have more right than her subjects. Homeless people doesn't have less right than the queen or the prime minister. We all have the same right to fulfill that fundamental yearning or the desire. So that is my first out of the two sort of summary, my first point. My second summary in this so far what I've said is this. we all should acknowledge our, our well-being is not just the physical well-being, not just the, the material have plenty. Our well-being is also keeping our inner world, our mental state, our emotions, thoughts, keeping them healthy and hygiene, keeping them free from the disturbances and the difficulties. And that is the second point I would like to summarize so far what I've said. So now that is the base. That understanding is the base. So we to talk our today's main topic. Now, our today's main topic is how to be a Buddhist in the 21st century. So now, first we talk about 21st century. What does that mean, 21st century? It is actually this counting we reach at the 21st century. It is not Asian way of counting the time or counting the century. It is the Western. It is, as you all know, it is the what you call the Jesus Christ, since Jesus Christ's death. Now we, the counting is 21st century. The Eastern, for example, in India or in Tibet, also have different way to count the years, decades, centuries, different way to mark that. But nowadays, this become almost like a universal, way to say the 21st century, the millennium, and so on and so forth. It is the power of the, the Western, what you call the, the influence, Western influence. For example, I'm Tibetan. Tibetans have another two ways to mark these, times. One is called Rabjung, one is called Gyalo. I don't think many Tibetans can understand those, how to count those things. I myself have a difficulty to count those things. But, now that is becoming more or less fact. We very much, influenced by the Western culture and Western way of thinking. In some cases, it is sad, losing our forefathers' cultures and traditions. So many of them are extremely useful. Many of them are extremely helpful. It is sad to lose some of them and to just, become like a universal way of counting, dating, everything in the Western culture. Anyway, that is how 21st century. Now, I will not talk very much on that. Now, while we're talking about this saying 21st century, today my angle is very much from the education, education. Now, I'm sure most of the participants in here fortunately have got, the modern educations, like, modern science, biology, neurology, or the, what you call the, all those modern field of science, and also what you call the sociology, and the economy, and politics. You may have got all those modern educations. And that is very extremely important, extremely important. We should have, we should have the educations, the topics that are taught in the modern time. All these, what I've listed, economy, sociology, and environment, ecology, science, different sciences. And having these, having knowledge in these fields are very, very important, very, very important. And it is not only to have the knowledge, in these fields, but also to understand, what are the benefits of having the modern, the educations and the modern, things, and participate modern events, use modern technologies, and so on and so forth. What are the benefits to the individual, to the community? And at the same time, it is important to understand what are the shortcomings. There are many shortcomings, due to modern, the modernity, we can use that. Since the industrial revolutions, late 19th, early 20th centuries, no doubt, so many good things are developed, had happened, particularly in the medical field. So many diseases are eradicated. So many new means and methods to treat very serious diseases are available. And using, the many modern, the means such as to travel to one place to another, to reach one, information to one place to another. No doubt, there are so many advantages of, since culture, since what's called the industrial revolutions. But at the same time, as we should know, there are so many, the shortcomings are also, created due to the modernity. There's a huge gap between rich and poor within the one community, let alone within the big country, within the, the what you call the global. There's huge gap, rich and poor. Look at in the United States, one of the most developed rich country in the world these days. But wealth is, what you call the, kept by just few percentage of the citizens. Majority have to work extremely hard. And I myself have seen, and many of you have, because have the modern technology and you have been to the West, I have seen in living in London more than 25 years, there are so many homeless people, sleeping in the streets. So there's created huge gap. Of course, people before the modernity, before the industrial revolution, I'm not denying, and there were, the poverty. Of course there were. But gap is, if you look at the modern, if you look at those, articles, those research papers, gap is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And those are the shortcomings. Look at the environment disasters and so forth. And these are, you people, younger generation, need to be aware of that. The modernity, or you can call it post-modern period, modernity is almost gone. But regardless of those, those differences, we need to understand the advantages as well as the disadvantages of the modern technologies. Look at risk of some risk of use nuclear weapons, which is before the industrial revolution didn't exist yet, but that is now a real risk, and so forth. So therefore, you as a 21st century, what's called the people, or educated in the 21st century, and use the 21st century, the education, have received the 21st century educations, and use the 21st century technologies. Same time, it is important to be aware of advantages and disadvantages, and also responsibility individual responsibility. We all have responsibility. It is not useful, it is not very helpful to think, I don't have any responsibility. Or, what can I do? I'm just individual. That kind of way of thinking is not very helpful. So that is something briefly, to talk about what you call the 21st century. I mean, there are many different ways we can talk about 21st century. I will look at on the 21st century, with our topic. I will leave it just for time being on that. It may come in our question and answer session, but for the time being, I will leave it on that. Here. Now I'm going to go to the Buddhist. How to be a Buddhist in 21st century. We talk about a Buddhist, and then to connect that with in the 21st century Buddhist, and we will connect with that. Now, as you know, this amazing spiritual tradition, they call Buddhism or the Buddha Dharma, in Sanskrit, Buddha Dharma. And, it is, although the teaching started by Gautama more than 2,500 years ago, many of his teachings are still extremely irrelevant modern time. And subsequent, those great Indian Nalanda masters' commentaries and their own writings, on this teachings of the Buddha is still extremely helpful. Particularly understanding of our inner world, that is our emotions, thoughts, minds, consciousnesses. Extremely rich, profound teachings are there in the Buddha Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, in particularly Nalanda Buddhist traditions. I'm not saying one is better than another. I'm not saying our tradition is much better than another. I'm not talking about that. I'm just simply explaining what is here in this, rich Buddhist traditions. So now, of course, all the major world religious traditions, in this 21st century, religious teachers will say, our teachings, our founders' teachings are still irrelevant on this 21st century. Nobody will say not irrelevant. Everybody will say our teachers or our founders' teachings are extremely irrelevant. I would agree with that. I would agree with that because all the world major religious traditions, their common message to their followers is to have, the love, compassion, forgiveness, tolerance, and so forth. These are the common message to their followers. And these are extremely relevant in this 21st century. In this 21st century, very competitive, very, what you call the demanding, and also in certain extenses, very isolated, although millions of people live in a big cities, but still individuals experience loneliness. I know this myself when I was living in London. London is not that big city compared to Indian cities like Bombay, Delhi, or other big cities. Yet London is, in London, there are about 7 to 8 million residents. And 7 to 8 million human beings living in one area, like London, is quite a big gathering. Yet there are many people suffer with the loneliness, depression, So that in that kind of environment, of course, that these teachings, common teachings, are extremely relevant. So, that is the share with all the major religious traditions. Now here, our topic is, Buddha Dharma, teachings of the Buddha. Now, up to recently, like for example, the Tibetans, until 1959, we lived in a very isolated, very much isolated way, hardly have connection to the outside world, hardly know what's happening in the outside world, hardly use, those modern technologies. Now, nowadays, the information and explanation, as we talked about earlier, those science, neurology, biology, the physics, astronomy, and all these science, give us so many what's called informations. I'm not saying all what they have found is right or correct. I'm not saying that. Also, I'm not saying they are not correct. But so many informations are gathered, collected, and given to the public. In that kind of environment, how to approach the teachings of the Buddha. This means in 21st century, how to approach, how to take the teachings of the Buddha should not be taken as, for example, for the Tibetans, like in the before 1959. Before 1959 in Tibet, only the monks who have studied these texts, who have learned, who have practices, they know. Majority Tibetans, how they practice teachings of the Buddha is mainly, out of just pure faith. Pure faith, not with the understanding of the teachings of the Buddha. Pure faith. Faith is useful, but just following the teachings of the Buddha, just faith, based on faith alone, is not, to follow the teachings of the Buddha in this 21st century. For our own sake and for the sake of the teachings of the Buddha. And this is clearly stated, in the Buddha's his own teaching, and also subsequently some of the Indian masters. And I'm sure many of you have heard from His Holiness the Dalai Lama's teachings. He cited this verse very often. In one of the sutras, the teachings of the Buddha, Buddha said to his followers, don't follow his teachings purely out of faith in him. Follow his teachings through, analysis, investigations, and through that, when you have found the meaning, found the, the truth, then follow his teachings. Like the goldsmith, analyzes his or her gold to have a pure gold through rubbing, cutting, and burning to make the pure gold. Similar to that, Buddha said to his followers, follow his teachings through analysis, investigations, and when you understand his teachings, then follow. That's Buddha's his own word. And that is very, very unique, very, very unique within the world religious teachers. Hardly any, as far as I know, any world religious founder have said that. Don't follow my teaching just out of faith in me. Follow my teachings after you have done the research, after you have done the analysis. When you see the usefulness, when you see the benefits, when you see the truth, then follow. That is very exceptional. And that is a very much 21st century way to approach the teachings of the Buddha. If we want to become a 21st century Buddhist, we should follow his teachings in that fashion. Also, there's another great Indian master, Hayavatra. Now my Sanskrit term, in Tibetan, Singesambho, Hayavatra, not Hayavatra, Hayavatra, Singesambho, who wrote nice commentaries on some of the important texts. And there he talked about there are two ways to approach, the teachings of the Buddha. Two ways to approach. The first one is what he said, due to different mental faculties. Some people have a very sharp faculties. The sharp faculty, they follow the teachings of the Buddha through investigations, analysis, and when they found the truth, the fact, then they will follow. It is in Tibetan, it is called Ongbo Nombo. Ongbo Nombo, literally it means sharp faculty, people who have a sharp faculty. And the second one is called, the people who don't have sharp faculty, they follow the teachings of the Buddha out of faith, out of faith. Out of those two ways to follow the teachings of the Buddha, best way to follow the teachings of the Buddha is through, the first one, that is through analysis, investigations, research. Then when you find the usefulness, helpfulness, beneficial, truthful, then follow. And that is the way to follow the 21st century, to follow the teachings of the Buddha. And I think that's very, very useful. And, like these days in the 21st century, there is a strong emphasis from basic, when you go to shopping, to the supermarket, to go to buy your weekly needs. I'm sure it is same in here in India, though if you go to those supermarkets in London, when you go to do your weekly shopping, almost every single atom that you buy, they are full of information, where they come from, the product, how many calories are there, how many, all those informations are given. Sometimes people call it is, this century is the information century. And I agree with that in certain extents. So that is here, that is here. What, now I'm moving to a another step that is procedure, how to follow the teachings of the Buddha. So far what I've said is the methodology. The method, the means and method to follow the teachings of the Buddha is through analysis, through investigation, through research. That is the methodology, not out of pure faith, although faith is useful, helpful, beneficial, but not just out of faith. Must have analysis in your process to follow the teachings of the Buddha. That is the methodology. Now I'm going to move to the next step. That is the procedure. That is the procedure, and very, very useful procedure to understand. Procedure is this. There are three steps. The first step is gather lots of information on the teachings of the Buddha. Nowadays there are so many ways, like including today what we are doing. If you, I'm not very keen to look at the YouTube and all those things, but there are so many informations on the teachings of the Buddha by so many great teachers, and so many books are available in English, in different languages. It is extremely useful to make oneself very rich in the information. Traditionally, it is called, in Tibetan, I will use the Tibetan term, Turba. Turba literally it means hearing, because in the past, at the Buddha's time, and almost until just a few hundred years ago, books are not readily available. Mainly you can hear from different people, different teachers. So when you collect information, when you make yourself very rich in the information, that's the first step. Through collecting good information, have a rich information, you will gain certain levels of understanding. Traditionally, it is called, in Tibetan, it is called, the Tujung Ki Sherap, wisdom through the listening. You gain wisdom through listening, reading. And that is the first step. So, for example, myself, I was educated in this monastery where I am now for nearly 20 years, from 1970 to 1990. And during that time, of course, don't have these modern technologies, and also books, and these are quite, not that readily available like these days. These days, so many books are printed, and I usually feel these days the monks, the students are very, very lucky compared to our time. Sometimes our time, we have to share one traditional pecha, that one page. Sometimes we have to share 2-3 students in one same class. Today I will read, tomorrow the other will read, and go like that. These days, plenty of books. So I'm talking about my own experience. So when I was here, my main sources to make myself rich in the information, in the teachings of the Buddha, is mainly, the our monastic texts, and then Geshe Lharampa and his followers' texts, and then a little bit some of those great Indian masters' texts. That is it. That is it. Very few may read some other Tibetan Buddhist traditions, like Nyingma tradition, Kagyu tradition, and Sajja tradition. Not many. Few. Some of those top monks, they do. But also, as I said, facilities are not there. Now, what I'm talking about this. What I'm talking about this is we keep ourselves very isolated. So since I went to the West, mainly initially 3 years in France, then in UK, learn language, English, and then I encounter other traditions, many Theravadan traditions, very, very nice monks, scholars, and read many, Theravadan sutras, commentaries, like the Satipatthana Sutras, commentary on mindfulness meditation, many. So that is the first thing. And you young generation, you have so many facilities. So first step, if you want to become a 21st century Buddhist, make yourself very rich, not partial, impartial reading. Partial is not very helpful to make ourselves very rich. So, impartial reading, this is the first step. But whatever wisdom, whatever understanding you gain from reading, listening, from the others, that is not, that's not enough, if I use that term. Now, the second step is introduced in the Buddhist tradition. That is called contemplation. Because knowledge that you have gained from listening from others is not your own knowledge. It is others' knowledge. So to make those, what you have heard, what you have read, what you have discussed with others, now to make your own knowledge, your own understanding, then that is the second step, which is called contemplation or analysis. The points, the statements, the information that you read, that you collected, must be analyzed by your own. Rigorously, analyze, investigate, do the research, and from there, then you will gain the second understanding. Traditionally, it is called Samjungi Sherap in Tibetan. That means wisdom through contemplation or analysis. And that is your own understanding. That is your own knowledge. And that's the second step. And third step, what you have gained from your analysis, your investigation, your research, your own analysis, contemplation, analytical meditation, what you have understood, then put into practice. Technically, it is called, in Tibetan, it is called Gomjungi Sherap, wisdom through meditation. Here, the meditation is talking about in a very particular context. Meditation in the sense, familiarize. What you have understood from your previous work, that is through analysis, you must familiarize within yourself again and again and again, until that understanding become part of your way of life, your way of thinking, your way of interacting with others. And that is called Samjungi Sherap. Very loosely what I'm talking. And that is the procedure. There are 3 steps. So that's the one, another things which may be useful to talk about. Now, now we are more or less an hour is already passed. Now I'm going to go to talk about briefly how to become Buddhist. So far, what I've talked about, procedure to become Buddhist in the 21st century. Procedure is, the methodology is through analysis, investigations, your own research, not just pure faith. That's the methodology. Procedure is in these three stages: listening, contemplation, and meditation. Now then, what is the first step me to become Buddhist? Either in the 21st century or at the Buddhist time, regardless of different time zone, different time, to becoming Buddhist is, through understanding the qualities of the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. The qualities, the features of the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. That is the one factor. With that understanding of the qualities of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, then taking the Buddha as one's own mentor, teacher, and his teaching, Dharma, as a means and methods to experience, to actualize, to apply in our everyday lives. And Sangha, those not necessarily to be ordained monks and nuns. Sangha has a different meanings, different way, because Sangha, in a cultural term, it refers to the ordained monastic monks and nuns are called Sangha. But in here, in the three jewels, Sangha has a particular sort of qualification. If somebody is Sangha, not necessarily be a monk, monastic monks or nuns. Or if he or she is monastic monks or nuns, not necessarily he or she be the Sangha in the three Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So these are the technical, which I will not go into detail. So Sangha as one's own supporter that when you follow the teachings of the Buddha. And that is something very loosely speaking, how to become Buddhist, oneself as a Buddhist, is through the understanding, not the faith, through the understanding of the qualities of the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha, then seeing them, Buddha as a teacher, one's own mentor, teacher, Dharma, his teachings, to be applied in our daily lives, to be experienced, and his Sangha, third, as a supporter, helper. When we have that kind of mindset, that kind of feeling, experience in our everyday lives, then loosely speaking, we can say, I'm a Buddhist, or he or she is a Buddhist. And that is something I'm talking about very loosely speaking. Now, with this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to jump back to our earlier topic. Earlier topic, what we have is, when I was talking about foundation to talk on this topic, I said, there are many different ways and means to keep ourselves physically and mentally happy, fulfilled, joy. And following a spiritual path is one of them. And from the people like myself, people who follow the teachings of the Buddha, using the teachings teachings of the Buddha as a means and methods to keep particularly my mental state healthy is the best way to keep my emotions, thoughts very hygiene, very what you call the less disturbances and difficulties and confusions and so on and so forth. As I mentioned earlier, in the West, there are so many institutions and means and methods to keep this body very healthy, very good looking, very handsome, very beautiful, and so on and so forth. Similar to that, the following spiritual path, and in this case, following the teachings of the Buddha, is one of the means and methods to keep our, not just the physical, but mainly our mental state, our minds, thoughts, emotions, consciousnesses, very sound, very hygiene, very what you call the constructive and healthy. Now, how to keep that? Now it comes in here. How to do that is, the first step is seeing, understanding the historical Buddha as one's own mentor, teacher, and his teachings, and subsequently those Indian great masters, teachings are like these are the means and methods and instructions how to live our minds, thoughts, emotions, very healthy, very clean, very hygiene. And look at the Sangha as a supporter. We can look at as an example, like in a modern term, like a role model. For example, in the West, I'm sure it is also happening in the East too. It is more like a universal. The 21st century, those teenagers, they all have their own role model, pop singer, what you call those, somehow last few years, some of those Korean, pop singers are very, very popular, like that. So Sangha is our role model to look at, to learn from them. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that is really something to how to start as a 21st century Buddhist. And to go through this, as I mentioned, methodology, procedure, then, taking what technically called taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Buddha as a teacher, mentor, Dharma as a means and methods, and Sangha as a supporter. To keep our mental state healthy, hygienic, and positive, constructive, and so forth. Yeah? Okay. Now, then the next, I'm going to move to another step. That is, I hope you are able to follow what I'm saying, not exhausted. I'll talk another 10 minutes. Then we will see still if I have energy, then I will talk another, so first I will talk another 10 minutes on this topic. Then I will move to our second topic, which I will not spend that much time. Now, here, I would suggest to our friends, here, some of the common and basic teachings of the Buddha should be explored, should be, learned. That is, technically called four seals, or sometimes translated four axioms. In Tibetan, Tawa Kartaki Chakya Shi. In the Tibetan tradition, there are four, but the common, like the Theravadan tradition and common, the sutra, they talk about three, not four, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What are those four? I will just briefly touch on that, and I would like you to explore these based on some of the teachings, commentaries written by scholars. Now, what Buddha said to his followers. Buddha said to his followers, that things and events, the things and events come into being. Things and events come into existence dependent on causes and conditions. They all are impermanent. They all are impermanent. And that is very important message from the Buddha. That is the fact, that is reality. All things and events that we have on this universe, from the building blocks of the atoms, whatever you call it, cork and all those small atoms, to up to the universe itself, all these things and events are subject to change. Subject to change. Nothing stays static. Static, you know that static means without, the changing. When I use the term changing, I don't mean changing from becoming table to computer to house. I'm not talking about that. Momentariness. Momentarily moving to the next step. And the Buddha said to his followers, understanding that nature of the things and events is extremely important. That understanding is not just intellectual, philosophical understanding. That understanding has a tremendous impact in our everyday lives. In our everyday lives, particularly our emotional level. To deal with some of our very unhealthy emotions, such as greed. Some people are very greedy, constantly need more and more and more. Never enough. Whatever they have got, never enough. And that kind of pain, that kind of unhealthy mental state is extremely unhelpful to oneself and people who live around himself or herself and the wider community. Buddha said, understanding that nature of impermanence is very, very helpful to ease that kind of very greedy mental state. And that's the first, what's called the seal or axiom. As a follower of the teachings of the Buddha, having that understanding is one of the key factors. Then the second, what Buddha said, that things and events, the things and events come into existence, come into being, with certain unhealthy emotions like attachment, aversion, and so on and so forth. All these things will bring, have the potential to bring unhappiness, to bring suffering. More or less, all what we have got here, for example, myself, including this body, what I've got in here, all my possessions, they all have potential to cause pain to me, to cause difficulty to me, to cause suffering to me. That is the very, very important, the understanding. It is not just, what you call the religious dogma. That is important realization. When we understand that the things and events around me, within me, surrounded me, they all have potential to bring suffering. We will have a better understanding of their nature. Our approach to those things and events, including my concept, my feeling, my wishes, my yearning, they all have that kind of potential. And that is, very, very important understanding. That's the second. The first understanding is, in Tibetan, it is a Geshe Tashi Tsering. That means all the things and events come into existence, come into being, they are impermanence. And that is not just intellectual understanding, it has a tremendous important, the impacts to our daily lives, how we interact with the things and events. And the second seal or axiom is called Sakje Tamje Dongawa in Tibetan, that all things come into being, come into existence, they all have potential to cause pain immediately and the long term. That is also not just religious dogma, it has, and that's the second. Then third, is a very profound philosophical view, philosophical point, also which has tremendous power to eradicate some of our deep-rooted, some of our innate misunderstanding of the things and events, including our own identity. That is called, things and events. Things and events do not have any entity, in and of themselves. Things and events do not have any kind of entity as they are from their own right, from their own side, or in and of themselves. All things and events are dependently arising, not something static, independent. And that understanding is a little bit complicated, but very important. You can keep in your mind and explore in the future. That third axiom, which I will not go that much detail in here. And fourth, which is explained in the Tibetan Mahayana tradition, not very much in the Theravadan tradition, as the fourth seals. The fourth is saying, when the suffering and the origins of suffering are ceased, finished, that is the real peace. That is the real peace. And that understanding, real peace is when suffering and the origin of sufferings are extinguished, ceased, or finished. That is the real peace. That is the fourth axiom. And these four are something very important. And I would suggest you to read some of very good books. For example, there's a nice book written by a great Sri Lankan scholar, Sri Lankan master. He's not anymore alive. His name is Walpola Rahula, and his book is called What the Buddha Taught. Very, very nice book, and written very, modern, way to address some of those profound teachings of the Buddha. The people who are interested, I would suggest it. And also there's a very nice book, very small, nice book, out of His Holiness Dalai Lama's teachings in London in 1997. That book is called Four Noble Truths. Four Noble Truths. A small booklet, which is very nice to explore some of the points that are raised, and also very, very useful, for younger generation to really, as I mentioned earlier, to gather the information for your analysis, for your investigation, to become a 21st century Buddhist. And that is really something useful. Now, before I move to our next topic briefly, which I'm going to do, just a part of resting or relaxing a little bit, I would like to suggest you some of you already know these books to read. Some of the points that are made earlier. There's one very, very nice book called Ethics for New Millennium by His Holiness Dalai Lama in English. Ancient Wisdom, Modern World, which really fits to our today's topic. How to be a 21st century Buddhist. And that book, Ethics for New Millennium, is a very nice one. And another nice book, again by His Holiness, is called Beyond Religion, Ethics for a Whole World, which is also very, very useful for the younger generation. Younger generation who have resistance, who have very skeptical towards any form of religion, yet would like to have a very ethical way of living, like to have an ethical in their daily lives, and that Beyond Religion, which is very, very nice book, written by His Holiness Dalai Lama. That's all. Also, there's another, I'm sure this book has been published quite some time ago, which is called, The Art of Happiness. That's also by His Holiness Dalai Lama. So some of these books are very, very useful. I would suggest you to, when you have a free time, you to read. Okay, and there are also some other books, which one book I'm going to say later when we talk about our next topic. So next topic is, the primary consciousnesses and the mental practice. Just very brief, this one. I will not spend that much time. Now, as I mentioned earlier, one of the amazing, richness, information from the, Buddha and subsequently Nalanda Master's teaching is about the consciousnesses, about the emotions, about the minds, about the thoughts. And sometimes it is called, I usually call Buddhist psychology and Buddhist epistemology. Buddhist psychology and epistemology, why that kind of terminology is useful, that it is useful to understand, although these teachings are given some of them are more than 2,000 years ago, still their understanding about the human consciousness, human emotions, human thoughts are extremely relevant, extremely rich. It is not only in the Buddhist tradition, it is in the ancient Indian tradition, like Jainism, like Samkhya. Some of the ancient Indian spiritual traditions also have a tremendously rich explanation about our inner world. And that is extremely useful in this 21st century. What quite often His Holiness the Dalai Lama calls map of the mind or map of the consciousness, and which is really helpful. As I mentioned earlier, the modern time on this 21st century, extremely rich in the material development. There are many people suffering with the mental health problem. As you all know, depression, loneliness, and so many different types of mental illnesses. So many. Some people are materially extremely rich. Almost they have got everything, but still, they suffer with this mental illness, different mental illnesses, including suiciding. So, in that kind of time, that kind of, our heritage that we have, from those Buddha, the historical Buddha, and those great Indian masters, that now still, those teachings are still alive. It is not just explanation about emotions, thoughts, mental, the different mental states. They are sophisticated, technically called mental mind training, to train, to work with our minds, thoughts, and emotions. So many methods. Like, for example, these days, the mindfulness meditation is very, very popular in the West. If you have done 8 sessions of mindfulness meditation training, and they quite often they say, I'm instructor of mindfulness meditation. And sometimes I teach them, it is not that simple, just having 8 sessions of, training, it is not that. But in the Buddhist tradition, we have so many means and methods how to deal, how to enhance these positive mental states, such as love, compassion, tolerance, altruism, wisdom. We have very stage-by-stage training traditions, and traditions are still very much alive, not just in the book. Still, people are doing that. And that is something which, you younger generation should pay attention. They should pay attention. Because at the end of the day, when we talk about, becoming a 21st century Buddhist, what you are talking about, you are going to work with your inner world, with the teachings of the Buddha, and to really enhance some of those positive, constructive mental states, and reduce some of those unhealthy, unhelpful mental states. By doing that, to live in the family, to live in the society, to live in the institutions, to live in the humanity, to work with it for the humanity. And that is the 21st century Buddhist. To become a Buddhist, not necessarily you to become a monastic community, not necessarily within the monastic community, not necessarily you need to go to the retreat in a high mountain. Particularly in this kind of time, it is important with the make ourselves rich with the teachings of the Buddha, then engage into the community, And in that sense, there is a tremendous training available, like a shamatha, like a vipassana, like the mind training, dealing with the self-centered mind, egoistic mind, making one's own mind very altruism, compassionate. There are lots of meditation techniques called mind training. So those are the things that you should, useful to remember. Useful to remember. In that sense, there is one book which is I don't know whether it's still in the print or not. It has been there quite some time. Mind Science, East and West Dialogue, the Mind Body Medical Institute of Harvard Medical School, published Wisdom publication. It is, again, His Holiness Dalai Lama and some other Western Buddhist practitioner and scholar joined with the Harvard University's medical, those professors, and have a dialogue. And out of that, this book is published. It is some time ago. I don't know whether it's still, available or not. So there are these, just I'm showing you a few things. Now it is, I think that is more or less enough. I want to leave it for about half an hour time for questions and answer. So people who would like to have questions, what I've said, or from your own experiences encountering teachings of the Buddha, just like a friend, like a spiritual friend, share openly with others. That will be very, very helpful to do. Okay, thank you. So who will be the chair? And chairperson should come forward and take over now.
Okay, thank you, Geshe, for your sharing wisdom words. We are very pleased to hear from you, and you have shared so many good things with us today, where you have touched upon inner world. I think, we need to focus upon this inner world also, because many people are thinking about physical well-being and material well-being. So we will definitely follow this instruction. And without taking much time, now I would like to request our dear participants, if you have any queries or questions or doubt, you can freely ask to our Geshe. Thank you. Dear participants.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, Tender, you can go. Yeah, you can ask.
Hello. Kuwi na Geshe tuwi na Geshe.
No, kogudo. Yeah.
Geshe da Thoma Geshe ta tiringi tanda nga zo nanje gi tuling dila peba la Geshe la ngara niwe ne Geshe la trash tele da tuji che na shuye Geshe la. Ta Geshe la ta nyeja da nga zo ingmengi tanda singda keta chimboti thobala one karang one pemise kabosun la Geshe la tandi shuye ta ngara gi ta Geshe la chuwa ngara gi khande dol na ta chidang Murmuche che ta chidang di nambe gi chue di pete thar chimba ta yang ta pa chi ge na one phe gi ke dang yige di pe mise gi ke chimbo rezi kyom ji yang duka pe di kapsu ta di Geshe la phone ta di namba sangye bi chue di ta yang ta pa ta ga na chi thar chimba ji shen la phe gi ke di khaze ji ke chimbo ki me di ko la ta da Geshe la ge di inji phone ma 제제지 견투나 야보 용사 레삼고 두카진 디 맘디나라 녜녜 마제 히말라야 기 타타나지 피리 인데 갑 제가 고들 로케지 타타나 싱가라나 로케지 타게 삼고 두케실라 트시나.
Oh yeah. Okay. So just in case if there are people who don't understand Tibetan, the gentleman's question is, His Holiness Dalai Lama says very often the Tibetan language, and of course the written language and the spoken language is extremely crucial to understand the teachings of the Buddha. So if I give some my thoughts on the topic, that will be very helpful, because so many of the participants are Himalayan, region origin, and they have some connection with that. And that is the suggestion. I will try. Yes, it is. So far, up to now, to want to understand Nalanda Buddhist tradition. As you know, there's a Theravada tradition which is in Thailand, Burma, or Myanmar, and Sri Lanka, and also some other part of the world. But Nalanda Buddhist tradition started from the Nagarjuna all the way down to the Shankarakshita, Kamalashila, which many of those great Indian masters' teachings are kept in the Tibetan language and Tibetan written scripture. Although some of them are available in Chinese, because Nalanda Buddhist tradition was reached to China much earlier than in Tibet, more or less 600 or 700 years earlier than it reached to Tibet. Nevertheless, some part of the scriptures and the teachings which are kept in Tibetan language and the Tibetan writing is not that much available even in Chinese language. Like, for example, as I mentioned earlier, Buddhist logic and Buddhist epistemology, like from the Indian master of Dignath and Dharmakirti. Some of those are not available. I was told, although I'm not scholar in the Chinese, I was told they are not available in Chinese language. Same, some of the other, like for example, Nagarjuna's, what's called the Ayadev, many of those, some texts are available in Chinese, but not as many as available in Tibetan. That's the one thing why it is important. Now, second thing is Tibetan language and the writing, although between two have some gap, nevertheless, these two are still alive. We Tibetans still are able to read those ancient Tibetan texts, and we are still able to explain, write commentaries. Many of those written in Chinese are more or less that language. Very few scholars are able to read what is translated into Chinese in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd century. So in that sense, so far, if somebody really truly wants to learn, the Nalanda Buddhist tradition, up to now, only it is in Tibetan language. So therefore, it is true what His Holiness have said again and again, but also on another level, to keep this amazingly useful, helpful, rich tradition, because at the moment, at the present, it is only in the Tibetan language. Tibetan language, particularly written and also spoken, sort of slowly decline, then less and less people are there to understand in the written those great texts. So therefore, it is, for example, there are books, Tibetan texts are translated into English, into French, into German, Spanish, but very, very tiny amount compared to what we have in the Tibetan language. So in that sense, it is very, very crucial for the Tibetans and also Himalaya regions, the people, because spiritually you are connected with the Tibetan Buddhism, Nalanda Buddhist tradition, your forefathers, your ancestors have this strong connection with spiritually that tradition. It is useful to learn, to study, at least written Tibetan, the scriptures and those, if you want to know more depth in the Nalanda Buddhist traditions. Okay.
Oh, Geshe
Oh yeah. Tuje. Thank you.
Hello. Hello.
Okay,
Hello.
I can hear you.
Okay. Geshe
Testele.
I'm Tsering Dorje from Leh Ladakh from India, and I have a very simple question. Though you have explained it, I just missed the portion. I would like to understand what is map mind. If you could explain that briefly. Map mind.
Sorry, map mind. Did you say?
Mind, yeah, map mind. MAP map.
Oh,
Map
okay.
mind. Yes.
Okay, yeah. Okay. So when we say map of the mind, or map, M-A-P, map of the mind. So it is really, which I didn't say that much, I rushed a little bit on there. It is talking about what kind of positive mental states are here as a human beings. What is here consciously and subconsciously and potentially unhealthy mental states are here one individuals, and also it is talking about different degrees of mental states. Some are very obvious, very constantly coming forefront. Some are very much behind. In English, may use subconscious, and some are very subtle, may occur only certain states, and some are very gross. So in the Buddhist texts, there are so many explanations in the different levels of the mind, different kinds of the mind, different functions of the mind, and what once certain states of mind occurs, what happens to the individuals, and that is what we are talking about, map of the mind. Like, for example, if you want to travel these days in India, you can have in your mobile Google Map of India, then you can easily travel to every part, every corner of India. Similar to that, when you have the map of the mind, your emotions, your conceptual thoughts, your thinking process, gross, subtle, negative, positive, when you have information, all these things, then you are in a better position to deal with them. For example, in the West, they talk about lots of emotions. They talk about, what you call the subconscious and so on and so forth. But they don't have that much information compared to what we have in Buddhism. And that is what we are talking about, map of the mind. One of my books, I've written 6 books. In one book is called Buddhist Psychology. In there, I have written as chart different mental states, how they're connected, how they interact, and so on and so forth. Sometimes that kind of chart is useful to have some kind of image in our mind, and that is map of the mind. Okay.
Tashidele Geshe Tashidele. I am Maling Gombu from Monjul, Tawang.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to ask you, when we are talking about the Nalanda tradition,
yes,
are we talking about the teachings are the thoughts of the four traditions of Mahayana, that is the Nyingma tradition, the Gelug tradition, the Sakya, Kagyu. We have the four traditions in the Mahayana tradition. So when we now talk about the Nalanda tradition, which you say starting from Nagarjuna, are we
Yes.
also including the teachings of the other traditions? And then does Nalanda tradition include the teachings of other traditions of Mahayana?
Okay. Now, make it very clear first like this. When we talk about Nalanda traditions, we are talking about very much Indian Buddhist traditions. Yeah, Indian Buddhist traditions, sometimes people divide into saying Southern and Northern Buddhist tradition. Southern Buddhist tradition is referring to those Buddhist traditions in Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand. Those are the Southern Buddhist traditions. So when we talk about Northern Buddhist tradition, then it is talking about those Mahayana traditions like from the Nagarjuna. Even earlier than Nagarjuna, there might be some masters, but well known from the Nagarjunas to all the way down to 11th, 13th, 14th century Indian masters. So that's what we're talking about, Nalanda Buddhist traditions. Now, then when you say the four Mahayana traditions, you're talking about mainly, exclusively, you're talking about Tibetan Mahayana Buddhist traditions. So these two are slightly different. You are talking about the Tibetan Buddhist Mahayana traditions, Nyingma, in terms of the what you call the, in terms of the when it started first, Nyingma, then Kagyu, Satya, and the Gelug. So they're all based on some of those great Indian masters' texts. Like, for example, Nyingma tradition, when they talk about emptiness, their teachings are very much based on this great Indian master who came to Tibet, Shankarakshita. That is around 8th century master.
8th century, yes.
Yeah, so, Shankarakshita's teachings on Madhyamika is very much, one of the main sources in Nyingma traditions. So, all the four major Tibetan Mahayana traditions, many of their sources are based on some of those great Nalanda Buddhist traditions. So it is, in that way. So in other words, of course, later, each, like the Nyingma tradition, they have the Tibetan great scholars, and the Satya tradition, they have that's a different stage, again, different evolution. But if you trace the origin, they're all traced back to, some of those great Indian masters. Some are very well known, like Nagarjuna, Aryadev, Shankarakshita, and so on and so forth. Some are some of those Mahasiddhas, 80 Mahasiddhas of Indian traditions, Indian masters, which is not that much well known in the common sense, in the common knowledge. Some of Mahasiddhas like Kagyu traditions, some of those great Mahasiddhas are very much their main sources. Okay?
So when I say Nalanda tradition, when I say Nalanda tradition, then it includes all the traditions, because the origin of all these traditions also traced to the Indian masters. So in that sense, the Nalanda tradition is inclusive of all the four traditions of Mahayana Buddhism or the Tibetan Buddhism.
That is, when you talk about Tibetan, then these four, as you name, Nyingma, Kagyu, Satya, these are the four. But there are other Mahayana traditions, for example, which is not, in China, in Japan, in Vietnam, they also have Mahayana traditions.
Traditions, yes.
Yeah, but they are not included in four Tibetan traditions.
But they are included in the Nalanda tradition.
Not necessarily. Some are yes. The Chinese are yes, but I'm not sure in what you call the Vietnamese minor tradition. I'm not sure whether they are directly related to the Nalanda traditions.
Thank you,
Okay.
Trichala.
Good. Thank you, Trichala.
Is there any question from
Hello.
participants? Yes,
Hello. Oh, Geshe Lharampa.
Oh, yeah.
Ta Geshe Lharampa bucha jana England la ta milo ta nishu sanga England la shure ta tinde indi kap suta Geshe Lharampa ki shacho ki ta nganzo ki nganzo ki ta nganzo ki Asia ki kap nano ki mi ta ta na shi nucho ki mi parul la Geshe Lharampa ki nyamnyu pe chembo yedi kap suta nganzo tingdang ki ta tire mi ta ji pe ta nganzo ki mi tin so la ta nganzo ki ta mi se ki nganzo ki namba ta teba echo ki mi so la nanje nanje di ni le la kande doji tapse kande doji tamse kande doji tang ko na sum
Oh, yeah. So I mean, I would say very general differences in the Westerners to approach to the Buddha Dharma and Easterners to approach to the Buddha Dharma. Even in the younger generations, younger generations, but their forefathers may have some spirit, connected with the Buddha Dharma. In the West, whatever the reasons, I don't know exactly, I cannot pinpoint, but in the West, generally speaking, they really want to learn the more details. They really want to learn. This is what earlier I was talking about. You must be very skeptical. You shouldn't accept by the first statement. You shouldn't accept it because he or she is very famous. Not like that. Generally speaking, Westerners are in approaching Buddha Dharma in that fashion. They will want to know. They will argue. They will ask questions. They will not accept straight away. Although there are some Westerners are more, what you call the blind-faithted than us. That is some, but generally speaking, Westerners are very skeptical. Their approach are very skeptical, which is quite good. The Easterners, even the younger generations, they are very much, out of faith. They don't approach with a very critical thinking, which earlier I was talking about. To become a 21st century Buddhist, we should approach Buddha Dharma very critical thinking. Through the critical thinking analysis, then learn the teachings of the Buddha, then put into practice. As I mentioned earlier, quoting some of the Buddha's own words, like the goldsmith, analyzing his own gold. In that kind of very skeptical way to approach, then bring down to our heart level, then to become a Buddhist. And that is something which we should learn. Generally speaking, we should learn from Westerners. But we are very lucky. We are very lucky because we have heritated these amazing teachings. But we shouldn't be too complacent. I've met, because as you said, when I lived in the I lived in the West, I led once every month. I led classes to the young Tibetans in London, completely free, out of charge. But not many people will come. The Westerners, when I lead classes Wednesday evening and Friday evening, 100, 160, they all pay some charge, but they will come. So then you ask to the Tibetans, why you are not coming? Why you are not interested? They will answer, oh, I'm Buddhist, innate Buddhist. I'm born with a Buddhist. Yeah, but so sometimes we are very complacency over what we have, and that complacency is not very helpful. We should be very rigorous, and that is very useful. Okay, now we are approaching to the our end of our time. That is 5:30, and I would like to say, thank you for the organizer, and also I'm very, as I mentioned beginning of my talk, I'm very, very pleased you have this, the organization, Arunachal Buddhist Council of Nalanda Tradition, and I was told your main interest is to create the platform, purely and sincerely to raise the awareness and to give the opportunity to the younger generation to learn the teachings of the Buddha, and that is really something worthwhile. And I really hope you all continue and get the support from the members, and to fulfill your main aim. And on that, I want to say thank you. And conclusion is, as we started our conference with the positive thought, participating in this discussion with to benefit to oneself and to others, and also now we should conclude our discussion thinking, by participating this discussion for nearly 2 hours, all my efforts, all my energies, all my whatever my body, speech, and mind are participated, all these become the causes and the conditions that all living beings to have, to experience genuine happiness and to free from any form of difficulty. So with that, I will end my, I usually call my blah blah. Okay.
Without taking much time now, I would like to request our senior member of this organization, Geshe Tashi Tsering, to say a few words on the behalf of Arunachal Buddhist Council of Nalanda Tradition. Yenla, please. Yenla, unmute yourself first.
Tojiche, Arunachal Council, Buddhist Council of Nalanda Tradition ki member chigi gunle bachi, andering anzu tanda sobadi gune ane Sera Mey Monastery Geshe Tashi Tsering la anganzu de tendi shuje tanda dirab nishi zajibe nangba dang semdang semjung kolya kalop nangrochis pigushi videla ani kermje chone beজন chimbunang song ani kermje gi ndizu mangbutangche ani nganzolia pensem gitone de nangwadele ani be ning tagwanne tushi shuyi and tering nganzu de Tage gi gyune dos bigu shuwa cha song kaisana neyam dinde gi kembe dire ane mongbala ya de kerem je choda ngane page kungwesu ane nganzo men tawang dang bomdela kung ta kaje di Arunachal kungi nangba zulia Nalanda gi sogyun de nabar dagba ane digi sungshe yang ne yang to nang tobya gi nganzu bejon shugi ane kungo songa zu dendi shutu ya bezun chigi ane kermji chone inaya delya phemba injimji tangro na ane tanganzu ji dang nangba sigi yor de ina nangbegi ane goden chaza masang che mazo che dus tigi yore anpe da ningji gi yungone cha yore cheza di tholya ane kermji chone phemba yangsi jamna niji kunila dus nangro na maongbale ngosu petru ya kongshero nas shuai Tining Anzu Danda Arunachal Buddhist Council of Nalanda tradition said the Gojik to go Gimzer the Korean Sena, that's all Yaram Chego, she to be Adam. And Mazu Himalegi Miriki, Confucius Sangbodang, and Cheva Sangbore, Dana Shingi, and Digi Tapegi, Manzu Halor, the Manyambadang, and Jinchong Yontuya, the Yarge Yontuya Chedutang. Any desa any shingi duzulia mixegi that the Nalanda Sugundi and Gotope Tuyagi Chedu Mazudi Zushabaji. Lijawarmachegi that do Namshag in the Himalaya Mimanzolia, Ravadamas on the Chip Captain Manguji Nango or Echiza Mazu Nalanda Sugunto Lojon Chegu Res, the Nango that the Negimi Tonerai. And Yanga and Kermichelia Becushia and Mongola, this competent Sheje, this is now announced in Shia. And that Kermiche Kuzu Shunguyoyatang, and something church into Trubeg and Jawadang, Molam Kantu Jagi, and Tujiche.
Oh, yeah, Tujiche, Samaga Tujiche, Tujiche.
Would like to request Shri Puttan Kendala. Hello.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Oh, yeah. Just delay.
I'm Puttan Kaldan from Tawang, Arunachal Pradesh.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm assigned here with the duty to convey word of thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So first of all, I would like to convey our sincere thanks to Geshe Tashi Tsering and former Abbot of Sera Mey Monastery for giving us this wonderful teaching.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a great privilege to listen to Geshe La for all of us here today, and especially the younger ones. So Tujite Geshe La.
Oh, yeah.
And then I would like to thank Acha Thupten Wangmula, who is co-hosting this program from Europe. Without his effort, this program wouldn't have been possible. So thank you, Acha Thupten Wangmula. And then I would also like to thank the student participants from Lamdun Pesar School, Ladakh, for joining us in this maiden program. So thank you, students, and I'm sure you all must have enjoyed it. And then I would like to thank our Geshe Thupten Kedubla for initiating such a program, and I'm very sure it is immensely beneficial to many students or many people, especially the younger generations of this region. So thank you, Geshe Kedubla. And finally, I thank everyone for joining this program, and we sincerely would like to make a very strong request to Geshe Tashi Tsering to kindly give us teachings in the future as well. And at the end, let us all dedicate whatever merits that we have gathered here today to His Holiness the Dalai Lama for his good health. May he live long and may his wishes be fulfilled spontaneously.
This Kamaji. Mazu ge losan de la de pesha, mazu kermje de pesha, and gela tujiche shuai de pebdela. Then they game pesha and then have pesa so.
Oh yeah, tujiche, sama tujiche.
See you again.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Jana.
Tujiche.
Everyone.